over this past week, I have been watching some of Brandon Sanderson's lectures on his YouTube channel. I was kind of skeptical at first because writing isn't something you can really teach. You can talk about it and how it works, but I don't really think writing is something you can teach because it's an art form. You're either naturally driven to do it and improve, or you're just not. That's why I don't really do any like writing tutorial videos on my channel. I just talk about my own process and my own thoughts on what I've been writing. But I watched Brandon Sanderson's writing lectures, and they're really good actually. I do struggle with fantasy. Fantasy is just the one genre that I struggle at reading. So I'm not that familiar with Brandon Sanderson's works. I'm aware that he's written the Stormlight Archive, and I know that he's like considered the part of the big three of modern fantasy. You've got like Rothfuss, and then you've got what's his name, George R. R. Martin, and then you have Brandon Sanderson. Not necessarily in that order, but it's like a triangle. So I've been watching his lecture videos, and what I like about them is that they're not. See, almost every video about writing on YouTube is just somebody who thinks they're an expert but isn't. They're either an editor who can tell you what is popular and what is not, or they're a reader who does a lot of reading and thinks that that makes them an expert on the writing process. But actually, neither of those people are writers. Some of them are writers, but generally they tend to do editing as their main thing or reading as their main thing with writing on the side. And when I watched not Patrick Rothfuss, when I watched Brandon Sanderson, when I watched his videos, one of the things that I liked about them so much was that it was an actual writer talking about writing, not just someone who works in publishing, not just someone who thinks of themselves a writer because they're widely read. He talks about the experience of being a writer, about the reality of it. He talks about the different aspects of it, and he's also acknowledged something that almost nobody on YouTube does, which is that different writers are different, so what works for him won't necessarily work for the viewer. But that he tries to give as broad advice as possible. He's really translated it and communicated it into terms that I can understand and that I can relate to, instead of it just being a bunch of businessy bullshit. He's actually talking about what writing is and how it works. I really like Alan Moore because he talks about the history of writing and the craft of it, and he really goes deep into what writing means and its implications, and about the form that literature takes, and he really goes quite deep into the soil of it. Brandon Sanderson, though, is sort of the other side of that, where he talks about the actual practicalities of writing now, rather than just talking about like the history of literature and how it's become what it is. He talks about how if you want to be a writer, here's what writing actually is. Here's how it works. Here is how writing a book actually works in terms of how much time it takes. Like, for instance, he really broke down the maths of it really well. He said that the average book is about 1,000 words. And so if you write, I did work out the maths of this, but I don't have it written down and I'm not good with mental maths. But if you write for 8 hours a day, no, if you write for 8 hours a week, and that's going to be like, how many words a day is that? How many hours a day? 8 hours a week. That's broadly an hour 9 minutes, I think, or no, it's between 1 and 2 hours a day, basically. And if you can write 200 words, just 200 words within within that time frame every day, then by the end of the year, by the end of that 365 days period, you'll have 1,000 words written, and hopefully that will be your manuscript. And I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting. No one's ever really broken it down like that, because the thing about writing is it's very easy to think about how much more you still have left to write, and it's very easy to completely ignore how much you have in fact already written. And then he talked about how, because he's from the first generation that grew up playing video games, he's used to progress bars and seeing numbers go up and seeing stats improve, and how that is sort of the thing that gives him satisfaction in his mind, because it gives you that dopamine burst of you've made progress. It's like with video games, there's this line in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I actually don't know the character's name. This is just from like a clip I saw once, where someone is saying, it feels like when I'm doing well in the game, I'm doing well in real life, or something along those words. And then Charlie Day's character says, I want to make fun of you for saying that, but I kind of know what you mean. His character just talks really quickly. I struggle to keep up with it sometimes. It's and once he explained that made a lot of sense to me. That I do tend to think in those terms. I don't know whether or not video games have conditioned me to think this way, or whether or not they appeal to me because I have that kind of brain anyway. But I am used to like seeing numbers going up, and that being a good thing. Like more of anything, the higher the number goes, the better. And how that is how I get my sense of pseudo progress. And then he talked about how he started a spreadsheet for keeping track of his daily word count. And I decided to try the same thing. So I started a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets. I love spreadsheets. They're a great way of organizing information. And if you know what you're really doing with a spreadsheet, you can get it to do whatever you want it to do. And any information you have, any decision you're trying to make, anything you're trying to keep track of, if you know how to arrange that information in a spreadsheet, it will work wonders for you. And it will clear up so much mental space. And I'm not even that good at maths, but I know how to work a spreadsheet, at least is to do as far as what I need to do it. So I decided to experiment with that. So what I did was I started a word count spreadsheet, and in column A, I have the total word count for that day. In column B, I then have the running total word count for the manuscript so far. And then in column C, I have a percentage. And that percentage is what percentage the running total word count of the manuscript is of 1,000. Because I figure if the average book is 1,000 words, no, is 100,000 words. Did I say the average book is 1,000 words earlier? Because it's not. The average book is 100,000 words. This video's gone to shit already. So anyway, the average book is 100,000 words, and I thought, okay, so if I can have like an ongoing tracker, an ongoing progress tracker for how much of my manuscript's running total word count is out of 100,000 as a percentage, there's my progress bar. There is the number that I'm seeing go up every single day. So for row 1, for that, I simply decided to take what was the running total word count at the time. And I made a note in column D this is actually the running total word count of the manuscript on that day when I started the spreadsheet. So far, nothing I've written on any day since then has been as much as that, but that's to be expected because that was the running total when I started. So the actual first day isn't for row 2. Actually, no, the column headings are in row 1. So the information doesn't start till row 2. And then like the actual daily word counts begin with row 3. All of this seemed much simpler in my head when I was explaining it. I don't know why I'm so burnt tonight. Anyway, so that's what I've been doing, and the way that I have done this is that the percentage in row C, in column C, is the running total word count in row B divided by 100,000 multiplied by 100. That is how you get that number as a percentage of 100,000. You divide it by 100,000, then you multiply that by 100. So for instance, if you've got 4,000 words written of your manuscript so far, that running total is 4% of your manuscript. Thing is, I don't know whether my book is going to be 100,000 words or not. It might be 150,000 words. It might only be 90,000 words. I don't know. I still have to remind myself, this isn't actually a progress tracker of the book because I don't know how many words the book is going to be. This is just a progress tracker of 100,000 words. And I am finding that it's been helping a lot because writing is like mountain climbing in a way. I forget where I first heard this. Oh, hang on. It was that Japanese filmmaker who made Seven Samurai, whose name escapes me. He's name dropped in 1 week. What's his name? Okay, I don't make films, but if I did the Seven Samurai, just like Kurosawa. Yeah. It was, I think it was Kurosawa who talked about this, how writing is like mountain climbing. When you learn mountain climbing, what they teach you is not to focus on the peak. They teach you to just keep looking at the ground, which seems counterintuitive because people are usually told with heights to not look down. But with mountain climbing, you're taught to actually look at the ground so that then you can see how far up the mountain you've climbed. Because if you could see how much further you have to climb, you'd want to give up, which makes a kind of sense. The thing is, I've already climbed this mountain several times. I've actually, like, my draft numbering system is just all out of whack. So I've no idea how many actual drafts I have. You know, like asking me what draft I'm on is like asking me how many doctors there are. I used to know the answer to that, but I have like completed at least 3. I know that I've completed at least 3. I've had a few false starts between other drafts when I figured out I need to do this kind of differently, and then I've restarted or whatever. But I have completed at least 3 drafts, so I have climbed this mountain at least 3 times. Because the thing is, though, with each successive draft, I've become better at writing, and I've developed a better understanding of the story, and I now have like a much better idea of what I want the story to be and how I want to write it, and it's becoming more specific in my head, and it's solidifying more. which means I'm becoming more hypercritical of it. Even though I know I've done this before. But the three previous times it was easier because I didn't really care as much. Whereas this time it's a lot harder. But that's how writing works, that you sort of set the bar for yourself and you have to keep meeting it each time you write. But hopefully this will pay off and with future books, because this is my first one, a lot of it has been teaching myself how to write anything in order for me to then write this. So that's why it's taken so long. Hopefully this is going to sort of kickstart me into writing other things at a much better rate. And this this progress bar that I've been learning how to do from the Brandon Sanderson lectures is one of those things that I've picked up in teaching myself. He didn't actually specify how you do that in a spreadsheet. That was just me. I decided to do it that way. I don't know if he mentioned it being in a spreadsheet or not, but that's how I do it. So like I can, after so many days of writing this successively, once I have like a load of rows filled in, then it's going to start paying off, and I can see the word count piling up and that percentage bar getting increasingly longer. So it's not a real percentage bar. I don't know if you can do a percentage bar in a spreadsheet or not. You might be able to, but it doesn't matter. This is just how I'm thinking about it. But that's what I'm doing at the moment, where I'm just trying to focus on that. Focus on, now that I actually have the information in front of me. Like that's something that my manager from my last job was quite quick to realize about me, that I'm much better at dealing with something when I can see the information represented on a page somehow. If there's like a diagram or something, that is something that really helped me. So I got the task that involved more of that. Like teaching yourself how to write is basically teaching yourself how you think and how you work, and how you process all the information that comes with the thing that you're writing. For me, it turns out I like being able to see it as hard data, because data is either right or it's wrong. That's what I like about it. Maths can never be wrong. Numbers don't lie. I mean, there's massaged figures, like statistics can be like misinterpreted and stuff. But just in terms of me and what I need, taking all of this information and finally finding a way to actually actually sort of express it like that's something that I didn't know I needed, but I do. And hopefully that's going to make climbing the mountain even easier. Maybe. I still have the other thing I'm dealing with this second protagonist whose life I haven't really figured out yet, and I ought to, because I'm getting close to having to introduce them, and they need to be just as well developed as my first protagonist. But maybe I'll get to that. I did have an interesting thought about him the other week, in terms of it's an opportunity to experiment with writing it in two ways. If I have two characters and I alternate between them, I could do the Will Grayson thing and sort of alternate my writing style. I mean, granted, Will Grayson, that there was each Will Grayson had their own writer, but I could try something similar to that. Maybe try, like, I'm not entirely sure how, because I do have a very rigid, very specific way of writing. Like I was describing my main character's desk recently, and how many drawers it has, and what each drawer is for. And there was this big committee meeting that he was at recently, and I was like describing how the committee system works and what the structure of it is and what they do, and who all the members are, and I was describing like who has emailed him today, and that's sort of thing. So maybe I should try something maybe more free flowing with this other one. I don't know, but that's something to get to. Oh boy. This feels like that mountain in Lower Pomerania that's made of diamond. The one that takes an hour to climb and an hour to go around. And every 100 years a bird comes along and sharpens its beak on the peak of the diamond mountain. And when the entire mountain has been chiseled away, then maybe my book will be finished. Now, you may think that's a hell of a mountain, but personally, I reckon that's a hell of a book.